Another Fox News alert for you this morning. New Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh taking his seat on the high court for the first time today after President Trump apologized to him and his family during a swearing-in ceremony at the White House for the bitter partisan fight over his nomination.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. What happened to the Kavanaugh family violates every notion of fairness, decency, and due process.
The Senate confirmation process was contentious and emotional. That process is over. My focus now is to be the best justice I can be.
Which brings us to today. Peter Ducey's live from the White House. Peter, how else did President Trump try to move past that confirmation process?
Sandra, the president made a ruling on Kavanaugh's innocence with the entire Supreme Court sitting right next to him.
A man or a woman must always be presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. And with that, I must state that you, sir, under historic scrutiny, were proven innocent. Thank you.
Kavanaugh announced last night at the White House that he just became the first justice in Supreme Court history to hire all female clerks, something he says his mom, a former prosecutor, inspired him to do. But most of his time at the podium was spent saying thanks to his family and to the president.
I am grateful for your steadfast, unwavering support throughout this process. And I'm grateful to you and Mrs. Trump for the exceptional, overwhelming courtesy you have extended to my family and me. Mr. President, thank you for everything.
Today is Kavanaugh's first day on the Supreme Court, and his daughters got the day off of school to go and watch him hear two cases. Sandra?
That's always welcome. Well, Peter, the president's headed to Iowa later today. What can you tell us about that?
He's going to make an announcement at some point today about something that's very important to Iowa farmers. He's going to make gas available that has a higher level of ethanol. He's expected to direct the EPA to stop limiting gas with 15% ethanol during the summer months and allow its sale year-round. And since ethanol fuel is corn-based, that is good news for corn farmers in a state with several competitive districts in 2018 and a state that is expected to be competitive in 2020 as well. Sandra.
All right, Peter Ducey at the White House for us. A lot going on. Thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. I was struck as I watched that ceremony at, how things have changed. All the shouting, all the screaming, and it is finally over. And the president and, if you will, the new justice of the Supreme Court took something of a victory lap, Byron.
It was, and it may not totally be over. It was clearly a victory celebration, not just for the president, but for Senate Republicans and for Brett Kavanaugh. But it's pretty clear that this morning it has left a lot of Democrats and their supporters on the left even madder, if that is possible, than they were before. So I would look for them to continue to threaten continued investigation if they manage to win one house of Congress in the midterms next month.
Why, in your view, are they madder? Is it because of the president's proclamation that Kavanaugh is innocent?
Well, they felt that they were kind of rubbing it in. It was a very, very emotional and hard-fought fight, and they felt that the president did not take the high road. But again, they almost always feel that way about President Trump. But it was clearly a moment of intense victory, not just for Kavanaugh, not just for President Trump, but also for Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans who hung together to make this happen.
Yeah. And the effects of this confirmation, obviously he'll be on the Supreme Court a long time, but the near-term effects are starting to show in some of the election polling.
Yeah, the question has been, what effect will this have on the midterm elections? Republicans have been saying, look, we were having a hard time motivating our base in the last few weeks and months, but this has really done it. This has gotten a lot of Republican voters fired up. We're beginning to maybe see some evidence of that. There are a few new polls out in Tennessee in that Senate race to keep Bob Corker's seat, where the Democrat Phil Bredesen had been ahead, and it appears in some recent polls taken during the Kavanaugh fight. Marsha Blackburn, the representative running for the Republicans, seems to be pulling ahead. So we'll see if that is happening in other races as well. But of course, voting is 4 weeks from today. A lot could change between now and then.
That's curious to me, because back in November 2016, a lot of the, after polling polls showed that people voted that the Supreme Court was a huge issue for many of the voters who went to the polls in November and ultimately elected Donald Trump. So why would that issue sort of go away? Why would it be less important now?
Well, only it could go away if something else bigger happens in between now and then. It's been a pretty newsy year and a half, so we just don't know. But you're absolutely right about Republicans in the Supreme Court. There were Republicans who supported Donald Trump all the way in 2016, and there were other Republicans who had their doubts about him, but he had come up with a list of very distinguished possible nominees for the Supreme Court. He promised to stick to that list if he were elected president, and for that reason alone, they decided to vote for him, and they are happy with what he has done in keeping that promise, both in the Neil Gorsuch nomination and now in the Brett Kavanaugh nomination.
But Kavanaugh is filling in for a Republican appointee. He has taken the place of Justice Kennedy on the Supreme Court. How different might his votes be?
Well, history has shown us over and over again that you really can't predict what a justice is going to do once he has that lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court. But the justice that Kavanaugh is replacing, Anthony Kennedy, was known as the swing vote on the court, often with the conservatives on issues of politics or the economy, business, that kind of stuff, but often with the liberal wing on some cultural and social issues like abortion and gay marriage. So what does that change with Kavanaugh? It would appear that it is going to move further right, certainly on some of those cultural issues. But again, history shows you really can't tell until those decisions start coming.
Byron York. Byron, good to have you on. Thanks.